Shabbat Shalom. This is going to be my Sabbath reading. I believe we left off at Genesis 15. I believe. Yeah, Genesis 15 is where we left off. I was just checking there to confirm. Before we get started, there are a lot of notes in the back of my book here. And yeah, a lot of them explaining certain things. And there's a little things at the bottom of certain pages that say to see this passage in the note for a greater explanation. So I would like to read just a little bit of one of the explanations here in the back about the word Elohim or however it's actually pronounced. I know I butcher a lot of words here, but I'm going to try anyway. So El, mighty one or strength. Elam is plural of El. Eloah, singular from Elohim, has the same meaning as El, and it's spelled E-L-O-A-H. So Elohim, so it would be Eloah. Eloah, I think is how it's pronounced. So Elohim is plural of Eloah, rulers and messengers. And I'm going to skip over here just a little bit. So the word El, E-L, is a very ancient Semitic term among Semitic languages. It is one of the most used terms for greatness, strength, or deity. In Hebrew religion, usage does not denote a proper name, but is used as a title, used for the Creator's superiority over all others as a generic term. In Daniel 11:36, the El of Elohim, or El, Eloah, Elohim, is used to refer to the Creator, but also applied to rulers, messengers, and persons. So the word is a title, kind of like the word Lord is a title. So yeah, so we'll find later in the book when I get to the reading, when we're going through, and I'll just read it to you here. It's referring to Moses in Samoth, which is Exodus 4:16, and it says, "And it shall be that he shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be an Elohim for him." So it's the Father, the Almighty, is referring to Moses as an Elohim to his brother Aaron in that particular passage, but we haven't got there yet in this particular reading. And I just wanted to go over a little bit about the word Elohim, because in the title is actually a pluralized title, so plural for what it's been explained, and what I understand is plural for the three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So yeah, and a lot of churches preach against what they called, I believe they called it the Holy Trinity at some point. And a lot of churches really do preach against that now, especially the last church I actually attended, which was an apostolic church. They preached against that completely. They said there is only one. He is the Father, He is the Son, and He is the Holy Spirit. And these people are very strong believers in that Jesus or Yeshua is the only one, and he should be the one you pray to. And a lot of churches now preach this same type of message, that there is only one. And as far as my understanding, there are three, because that's what this book tells me. And a lot of people will tell you that they are one and the same, but they are separate. And from my understanding, they are separate entities with the same, I mean, from my limited understanding, I would call them separate entities with using the same mind. I mean, and that's just my very limited understanding of it. So humans don't have the capacity to understand the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They just don't have the capacity to understand how that works. So are they one entity or three entities? I mean, that's a very, very common question, and my personal belief is that they are three, but they are one. Okay, yeah. So, Genesis 15. We left off, we were talking about Abram, and he had just done battle with the sovereigns. Sovereigns would be what they referred to as kings, basically. They had kidnapped what they call his brother, which I believe is actually his nephew, Lot, and he went and did battle with them and took Lot back. So that's where we had left off in 14, and I wanted to mention that because of how 15 starts. So here we go. I gotta speak now, speak words, and read words that I'm speaking in. I have a lot of difficulty with that. I'm going to start this a little differently before I start reading, because this is something I've been practicing myself and memorizing myself, and I have a bookmark here. Look, it says cross. Yeah, that's not what it means. But anyway, this is going to be Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. Here, and this is the Shema. This is the most holy prayer according to the Torah. This is the most holy prayer. You're supposed to write it on your doorway. You're supposed to speak it before you lay down at night. You're supposed to speak it first thing in the morning. You're supposed to, speak it when you cross your threshold. And there's a lot to be said about a threshold. So, anyway, I'm going to recite it here. Like I said, Deuteronomy, this is chapter 6, starting at verse 4. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh, our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all of your heart, with all of your being, and with all of your might. Now you may read this in your King James Bible, which is over there actually, and it refers to the Father as a Lord. And I strongly disagree with referring to the Father or the Son as a Lord. Because if you know the hierarchy of a kingdom, a lord is a lot lower than the king. So I really disagree with that. So I will continue to use the word Elohim and Father and other such terms, and I will not use words like Lord, because no. All right, and that's one of the reasons I have this book in front of me and not my King James. All right, so now I'm going to get started here. Genesis 15. It's actually called Bereshit, and I'll give, I learned a little bit about Hebrew words here, and the titles of each of these books is actually the first words in the book, because the Hebrew people and the Hebrew language is very literal. So Bereshit, and I will read it because the first words in here is in the beginning God, or in the beginning Elohim, are the first 4 words of the book, and Bereshit is basically in the beginning, is what it means. So, all right, Genesis 15, Bereshit. After these events, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great. And Abram said, Master Yahweh, what would you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus? I butcher words. And Abram said, See, you have given me no seed, and see, one born in my house is my heir. And see, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, This one is not your heir, but he who comes from your body is your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look now toward the heavens and count the stars, if you are able to count them. And he said to him, he being capitalized, Yahweh said to him, So are your seed. And he believed in Yahweh, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. We will discuss righteousness at a later time. And he said to him, I am Yahweh, who brought you out of the Ur-Kasdim, to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Master Yahweh, whereby do I know that I possess it? And Yahweh said to him, Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, and a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And Abram took all of these to him and cut them in the middle, and placed each half opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds. And the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. And it came to be, when the sun was going down, and a deep sleep fell upon Abram, that a frightening great darkness fell upon him. And he said to Abram, he being capitalized again, Yahweh, Know for the creation that your seed are to be sojourners in a land, dwellers in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And this is the prophecy of Moshe. But the nation whom they serve I am going to judge, and afterward let them come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you are going You are to go to your fathers in peace. You are to be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the crookedness of the Amorites is not yet complete. And it came to be, when the sun went down, and it was dark, that see a smoking oven and a burning torch passing between those pieces, the pieces that Abram had put out, pieces of the animals. On the same day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abram. He made a pact, a contract, a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your seed, from the river of the Mitzrayim to the great river, the river of Euphrates, with the Quinite and the Quezonite and the Quadamite, and the Hittite and the Pezerite and the Rephaim, and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girgashite and the Jebusite. That's a lot of sites and ites, right? Okay, that's the end of 15. Just to review a little bit, he made a pact or a covenant with Abram, and this we will see later in the story, and we will see a lot later in the story of Moshe or Moses also, because he was talking about the future in this particular passage, and I find that to be rather interesting that he was giving Abram a glimpse of the future. I mean, that's rather interesting. Why do you think Abram was so special to the Father? It's a question. Feel free to answer it. All right, I'm going to continue with 16. 16. And Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no child, and she had a Mitzrayite female servant whose name was Hagar. Mitzrayite is an Egyptian. And Sarai said to Abram, see, Yahweh has kept me from bearing children. Please go into my female servant, and it might be that I build up later. It might be that I am built up by her. Words. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her female servant, the Mitzrayite, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Sarai was not happy. And Sarai said to Abram, my wrong be upon you. I gave my female servant into your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. So the servant was despising Sarai. So I got that backwards, sorry. Let Yahweh judge between you and me. 16:6. And Abram said to Sarai, see, your female servant is in your hand. Do to her what is good in your eyes. And Sarai treated her harshly, and she fled from her presence. So Sarai was unhappy with her and treated her badly, and the servant left. 7. And the messenger of Yahweh found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's female servant, where have you come from, and where are you going? Do you think he didn't know? And she said, I am fleeing from the presence of Sarai, my mistress. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, return to your mistress and humble yourself under her hand. And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, I am going to increase your seed greatly, too numerous to be counted. Sound familiar? And the messenger of Yahweh said to her, see, you are conceiving and bearing a son. Conceiving and bearing a son. I'll learn to read one day, I really will. And shall call his name Ishmael. Because Yahweh has heard of your affliction. And he is to be a wild man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and dwell over against all his brothers. And she called the name of Yahweh who spoke to her, you are the El who sees, for she said, even here I have seen after him who sees me. That is why the well was called Be'er Royal. See, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. 86 years old. That's up there, right? So, just to review, Abram's wife was unhappy that she didn't have a child, and she was sad that her husband was unable to have a child of his own to be an heir to his estate, essentially. So she took it upon herself to give him a son by way of other means. Was it the right choice? Humans are always trying to take things into their own hands. I'll leave it at that. Let's go ahead and do 17, and then I'll end it there. And it came to be when Abram was 99 years old that Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect. Be perfect, he says. The Father told this man to be perfect. Is he capable? And I give my covenant between me and you, and shall greatly increase you. And Abram fell on his face, and Elohim spoke with him, saying, As for me, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations. Nations in this particular book refers to groups of people, not necessarily borders and countries, but large groups of people. 17:5. And no longer is your name called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, because I shall make you a father of many nations. And I shall make you exceedingly fruitful, and make nations of you, and sovereigns shall come from you, kings. It got darker in here. And I lost my place. Okay, we're at 17:7. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be Elohim to you and to your seed after you. Everlasting. Think about that one. And I shall give to you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, and the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. There's that word again. And I shall be their Elohim. And Elohim said to Abraham, As for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you guard between me and you, and your seed after you. Every male among you is to be circumcised, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you. And a son of 8 days is circumcised by you, every male in your generations, who is born in your house or bought with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your silver has to be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And an uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And Elohim said to Abraham, As for Sarai your wife, do not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I shall bless her, and also give you a son by her. And I shall bless her, and she shall become nations. Sovereigns of people are to be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, Is a child to be born to a man who is 100 years old? Or is Sarah, who is 90 years old, to bear a child? And Abraham said to Elohim, Oh, let Ishmael live before you. And Elohim said, No, Sarah your wife is truly bearing a son to you, and you shall call his name Isaac. It says Yeshak in here. Yeshak, actually. But Isaac, for simplicity's sake. And I shall establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. See, I shall bless him and shall make him fruitful and greatly increase him. He is to bring forth 12 princes, and I shall make him a great nation. 12 princes. Do you know anything about that? But my covenant I establish with Isaac, whom Sarah is to bear to you at this appointed time next year. And when he had ended speaking with him, Elohim went up from Abraham, and Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house, and all those bought with his silver, every male among men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very same day, as Elohim told him. I'm trying to imagine having that conversation with somebody. Come here, we gotta have a talk, and I'm bringing my knife. Sorry. 24. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Abraham and his son Ishmael, were circumcised that same day. All the men of his house, born in the house or bought with silver from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. Okay, I'm going to leave off there and we'll continue at 18. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get to the midweek reading just because this week's going to be very hectic, but I will do my extreme best to make sure that I still continue with the Sabbath readings. But just to reflect here just a minute on 17, everlasting covenant. And it's proven later in this book that the line of Abraham continued through Noah. Or Noah then to Abraham, and Abraham continued through Isaac and Jacob. Sorry, I said that wrong. Isaac and Jacob, and so on and so forth. So the line of Abraham is still continuing to this very day, right? Everlasting covenant. Now, I'm not telling you to go get circumcised if you're not. That's your business. I'm not saying that, because there are in the later parts of the book, you know what they call the new covenant. The new covenant about certain people not being circumcised. But there's also things in there in my belief that prove that the everlasting covenant still continued even after Yeshua. That's my opinion. I'm not trying to convert you. This is just what I feel in my heart. Circumcision. Could you imagine that conversation? Could you imagine being on the receiving end of that conversation where he's got a blade and he's like, come here, we gotta have a talk. Sorry. All right. These are still kind of uncomfortable for me to read. I do like the notes in the back of this thing. There are a lot of here. I'll try to show you. There's a lot of this. And there are a lot of explanations of words. In Dictionary of the New Testament Theology, Volume 3, page 410, after the author had critically examined all the alleged Sabbath-breaking text, he says in conclusion, we may conclude then that though Jesus broke through the the rabbi's traditions about the Sabbath, there was no annulling of the observance of the day. So, yeah. It's an explanation of keeping the Sabbath. It says, even though Yeshua broke through the rabbi's traditions about the Sabbath, there was no annulling of the observance of the day. I just believe personally that in the beginning of this book, the set-apart day was an everlasting covenant. And I don't believe it has ever been changed, and to this day I don't think it is ever been changed. I think we are meant, even if you don't believe that we are meant to keep all 600 laws of the Torah, which we are not able to keep, that's not possible until. But even if you don't believe that set-apart day is an everlasting covenant. It's an everlasting thing for all time. Until the earth and the heavens fade away, we shall keep the laws. My notes are down here. My notes. I have been studying Torah a lot. Leviticus 23 is where you'll find all the feast days. Deuteronomy 6:5, the Shema that I read in the beginning. You can find it in Matthew 22:34 through 40. The Shema is the greatest command. It's the greatest command, and this was said by Yeshua in Matthew 22:34 through 40. And you can look it up right there. Mark 14 through 12. Mark 14 verse 12 is, in my eyes, proof that Yeshua kept the Torah. And there is a lot of things in here to prove that, in my opinion. There are so many things. Revelation 12 verse 17. Keep the law or perish, basically. It's an everlasting law. I don't believe it has been changed. And that is, again, my personal beliefs. And I'm not trying to convince you. Well, maybe I am just a little bit. Just because. I mean, what does it stop you from doing? It's not a burden. It's not hard to keep the 7 feast days, or I think it's 7 feast days. I'm still learning. I really am. But I mean, it's not a hard thing to do. It's not a hard thing to do. Why is the church so against keeping the commandments that were given to Moses? They were only given to Moses because the people were locked in slavery for 400 years and they had forgotten. So he had to write them down and say, hey, look, before that it was passed on word of mouth. Before writing, it was passed on word of mouth. I mean, he gave him the laws on stone tablets. They didn't have sheets of paper. They didn't write before then. They passed it along. Righteousness. We'll have to talk about that later. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. Thank you guys for watching. Love y'all.